The rain splattered against the plate glass windows of Il Pulcro, sounding like mournful weeping against the heavy, oppressive silence of the dining room. It was a Tuesday, but in a place like this, a gilded mausoleum of old money and unspoken agreements, the day of the week held no significance. Only the clientele mattered. The air was thick, saturated with the clashing, expensive aromas of truffle oil, vintage Bordeaux, and the faint, acidic tang of fear. Emery Walsh felt that fear deep in her bones, a low-grade chill that had become her constant companion for the last 6 months. She balanced the heavy silver tray on one aching arm, holding her breath shallowly. At 25, she was a ghost haunting the edges of opulence, a phantom in a crisp white apron and a black tie uniform that cost more than her last 3 months' rent combined. She felt like she was drowning. Her father, Liam, was gone. His death, a quiet, unremarkable heart attack, according to the papers, had left behind a crater of grief and a mountain of medical debt so catastrophic that they felt like a physical weight on her chest. He had been a simple man, a gentle accountant who loved mythology books and smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. His final months in a private hospital, a desperate attempt to save him, had consumed everything. Now Emery was left with the bill. This job, serving men who could buy the very hospital that had failed her father, was her only lifeline. It was a lifeline she was seconds away from losing. Walsh, the maitre d', a severe man named Julian, hissed at her as she passed the service station. Table 7 is complaining. Their water glasses were empty for 90 seconds. 90. Get your head out of the clouds. One more mistake and you're gone. Yes, Julian. Sorry, Julian. Her voice was a muffled whisper, her throat tight. Head down, work hard, pay the bill. That was the mantra. She retrieved the chilled water pitcher, her hand trembling slightly. She just needed to make it through the night, just this one night. Then the carved oak doors of the restaurant swung open. A sudden, absolute silence descended upon the dining room. It wasn't a polite hush. It was a vacuum, as if all the air and noise had been violently sucked out. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died in mid-sentence. Even the clinking of silver on porcelain ceased. Emery's heart raced, her survival instincts screaming at the sudden shift in the atmosphere. She knew without looking. This was not a regular patron. He entered not like a man, but like a change in barometric pressure. Morello Vassallo. She had only seen his name whispered in the society pages. A digital ghost. The new dawn of the Vassallo family, a man who had inherited an empire of shadows and secrets at the age of 30, following the sudden, shocking death of his father 6 months prior. He was tall, dressed in a custom-tailored suit so dark it seemed to absorb the dim light of the chandeliers. His presence was a physical weight, a magnetic pull of raw, civilized danger. He moved with the lethal, silent grace of a panther, his dark eyes sweeping the room once, cataloging every threat, every exit, every face. His cologne drifted across the room. Sandalwood, amber, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like cold steel and ozone before a thunderstorm. He was followed by 2 men, mountains in bespoke suits, their eyes dead. Julian, the usually unflappable maitre d', looked positively ashen. He rushed forward, bowing slightly. Mr. Vassallo, an honor. Your usual table is ready. Morello said nothing. He simply nodded, his face an unreadable mask of cold, sharp angles and aristocratic beauty. He walked toward the back corner booth. His booth, Emery realized, the one permanently reserved, shrouded in the deepest shadows. Julian intercepted Emery as she tried to fade back toward the kitchen. His face was pale, his hands visibly shaking. Walsh, he whispered, his voice strained. Table 12. That table. Emery's blood ran cold. Me, Julian? I can't. Table 7. Table 7 doesn't matter, he hissed, shoving a menu into her hand. He doesn't like familiar faces. He doesn't like to be known. You're new. You're invisible. Just take his order. Be quick. And for the love of God, do not make eye contact. Her nerves frayed. This was a test she was designed to fail. Asterisk head down. Work hard. Asterisk she smoothed her apron, picked up her silver tray, her shield, and forced her feet to move. Every step toward that booth felt like wading through wet cement. The silence in the room was deafening, a tangible thing that pressed against her ears. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, but the only power in the room emanated from the man in the booth. She stood beside him, her gaze fixed firmly on the polished wood of the table. His 2 guards stood like statues, flanking the entrance to the alcove. "Good evening, sir," she managed, her voice tight, professional. "Can I get you something to drink?" The silence stretched, heavy and agonizing. He was reading a thin document, ignoring her completely. She waited, her arms starting to tremble under the weight of the tray. She could feel the intensity of his gaze even though he wasn't looking at her. Finally, without looking up, he spoke. "Macallan 25, neat." His voice was a low, muffled rumble, a gravelly sound that vibrated with absolute command. "Right away, sir." She pivoted, a small sigh of relief escaping her lips. She had survived. She just had to get the drink. As she turned, the heel of her worn, sensible shoe, the one with the sole peeling, caught on the edge of the plush Persian rug. Her ankle twisted, the heavy silver tray tilted, and a single empty water glass left from the previous setting slid inexorably toward the edge. Emery gasped, flailing to catch it. No, it was too late. The glass toppled, shattering on the marble floor. The sound in that pressurized silence was like a gunshot. Emery froze, horrified. Her career, her lifeline, her ability to pay the crushing debt. It all shattered with that glass. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll clean that up immediately." She dropped to her knees, mortified, her face burning with shame. This was it. She was fired. The debts would pile up. The eviction notice would finally come. She was trembling violently as she fumbled for the larger pieces of glass, her vision blurring with hot, angry tears. "Leave it." The command was soft, but it cut through her panic like a shard of ice. She stopped, her hand hovering over a jagged piece of crystal. "Look at me." She squeezed her eyes shut. "Don't make eye contact." Julian's warning screamed in her head, but the power in his voice was absolute. It was not a request. Slowly, she lifted her head. Morello Vassallo was finally looking at her, but not at her face. His gaze was intense, fixed on her chest, on the thin silver chain she wore tucked inside her uniform. In her haste to catch the glass, the chain had swung out. Hanging from it, resting against the white cotton of her apron, was a small, heavy charm. It was a ring, her father's ring. It was a simple, worn white gold band. She wore it for comfort, for the memory of him. She wore it because it was the only thing of value he had left. "That's my father's," she whispered, her hand flying to cover it. A protective, reflexive gesture. "Give it to me," Morello said. "No," she breathed, shocked at her own defiance. "No, it's all I have of him. I am not asking." He leaned forward, and for the first time, he extended his hand, palm up, under the dim glow of the table lamp, and Emery Walsh's world stopped. Her breath hitched, her blood ran cold, her entire body went numb. On his right ring finger he wore a ring. It was not simple. It was heavy, magnificent, intricately carved from white gold. It was designed in the unmistakable, breathtaking shape of a phoenix rising from flames. The craftsmanship was identical. The style was identical. And its eyes were 2 small, perfectly matched, burning ruby cabochons. It was her father's ring. Not his ring, but its twin. The one he always wore. The one he was buried without. The one the police report said was stolen the night he was found in his car. Dead. The words tore from her throat, a ragged, accusing gasp that echoed louder than the broken glass. That ring. My father. He was murdered for a ring that looked just like that. She didn't realize she had shouted the accusation until she saw Morello Vassallo's entire body go rigid. His dark eyes, now black with a terrifying, unknown emotion, snapped from the ring on his hand to her face. The casual power became a focused, lethal intensity. The temperature around the table plummeted. He didn't speak. He just stared. And in his eyes, she saw something flicker. Not just shock, not just recognition, but a cold, calculating darkness that terrified her to her very soul. The silence that followed Emery's desperate accusation was a palpable entity. It pressed down, heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic thrum of her own heart against her ribs. She was still kneeling amongst the shards of broken glass, her hand clamped uselessly over her mouth, her eyes locked on Morello Vassallo's. His face, moments before a mask of bored indifference, was now terrifyingly alive. Shock warred with a cold, dawning recognition, hardening his features into something sharp and dangerous. The air around him seemed to crackle, charged with unspoken violence. His guards shifted, their hands instinctively moving inside their jackets. Julian, the maitre d', hovered near the alcove, his face the color of old parchment. Morello moved with impossible slowness, a deliberate predatory grace that amplified the tension tenfold. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His whisper, when it came, sliced through the silence like a razor. "Stand up," he commanded. Emery scrambled to her feet, her legs trembling so violently she almost fell again. She felt dizzy, sick. What had she done? She had just accused the Dawn of the Vassallo family in public of having a connection to her father's murder. "Now," he continued, his voice dangerously soft, "sit down." He gestured, not with his hand, but with a slight inclination of his head towards the plush, leather-bound seat opposite him. "Sir, I can't," she stammered, the ingrained habits of servitude warring with the sheer terror freezing her limbs. "I'm working. I broke a glass." "Julian." Morello's eyes flickered briefly toward the maitre d'. Julian flinched as if struck. "You're not working," Morello stated, his gaze returning to Emery, pinning her in place. "Sit." It was not a request. It was an edict backed by the unspoken weight of his entire empire. Emery sank into the booth, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap her knuckles ached. Her heart raced, a frantic bird beating against the bars of her ribs. She kept her eyes down, focusing on the intricate pattern of the damask tablecloth. Anything but the man opposite her. He leaned forward, the dim glow from the single table lamp casting stark shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. The phoenix ring on his hand seemed to pulse with a malevolent light, the ruby eyes burning like embers. He steepled his fingers, the ring displayed prominently, deliberately. "Describe your father," he said, his voice flat, devoid of inflection, like a surgeon preparing for an incision. "His name was Liam," Emery whispered, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. "Liam Walsh. He was an accountant for a small import-export firm downtown." The lie felt thin, brittle, even as she clung to it. "He was quiet, kind, he loved books, especially books about myths, old stories." "An accountant," Morello repeated, the word hanging in the air like smoke. "And he was murdered 6 months ago." Emery confirmed, the grief a raw, physical ache. The police called it a robbery gone wrong near his office. But her voice cracked. "They didn't take his wallet. They didn't take his watch. They only took his ring. That ring." She pointed a trembling finger towards Morello's hand. "His father gave it to him. He never, ever took it off." Morello stared at her, his gaze intense, unwavering. He was searching her face, dissecting her expression, looking for the slightest hint of deceit, of calculation. She felt utterly exposed, stripped bare under the weight of his scrutiny. Was she lying? Was she setting some kind of trap? His mind worked behind those cold, dark eyes, weighing possibilities, assessing threats. "What was your father's full name?" The question was quiet, almost casual, but carried the precision of a sniper's bullet. "Liam Patrick Walsh." A muscle feathered along Morello's jawline. His stillness became absolute. He knew the name. The shock of recognition was clear, quickly masked. but she had seen it. He knew her father. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his scotch, the ice clinking softly against the heavy crystal, the only sound in their isolated bubble of tension. Then he placed the glass down with meticulous care and made a decision. He nodded, a sharp, almost imperceptible gesture, to the larger of his two guards standing sentinel by the entrance to the alcove. The man who looked carved from granite spoke quietly into his sleeve cufflink. Morello pushed a thick stack of $100 bills onto the table, enough to buy the entire restaurant, let alone cover a drink and a broken glass. He stood up, the sudden movement making Emery flinch. "Let's go." "Go?" Emery echoed, confusion momentarily overriding her fear. "Go where?" I have to finish my shift. Julian will fire me." Morello actually looked at her then, a flicker of something almost like amusement, or perhaps just profound disbelief, crossing his features. The concept of being fired was so utterly alien to his existence, so laughably mundane, it clearly didn't register as a valid concern. "You're finished," he said, the finality absolute. He didn't wait for her response. He simply turned and walked toward the main dining room, his guards falling into step behind him like loyal hounds. Emery was frozen. What choice did she have? Run? Scream for help? He hadn't overtly threatened her. He hadn't touched her. But the sheer, suffocating power rolling off him was a threat more potent than any weapon. If she stayed, Julian would fire her anyway. The Vassalo dawn had been disturbed. Heads would roll and hers would be the first. If she went, what awaited her? Darkness? Silence? Or answers? Her father's face flashed in her mind. His kind eyes, the gentle curve of his smile as he explained the myth of the phoenix rising from ashes. Then the stark, cold image from the morgue, his hand pale and bare where the ring should have been. Justice. The word was a bitter, hopeless taste in her mouth. This man, this terrifying, untouchable man, was the first and only link she had to the truth behind her father's death. She made a split-second decision. Survival instinct warred with a daughter's desperate need for answers. Answers. She bolted from the booth, nearly stumbling again. She grabbed her thin, worn coat from the staff cloakroom, ignoring Julian's wide, terrified eyes and frantic, shushing gestures. She burst out onto the wet pavement, the rain immediately soaking through her flimsy uniform jacket, the cold biting at her skin. A black, armored SUV, a hulking, obsidian beast, was idling silently at the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the dripping neon lights like malevolent eyes. The back door opened as she approached, a silent invitation into the unknown. Morello was inside, shrouded in shadows, his face illuminated only by the intermittent dim glow of passing streetlights. "Get in." Emery's hand hovered over the door handle, her knuckles white, her spine chilled. This was insane. This was the point of no return. Asterisk head down. Work hard star. But the image of the phoenix ring burning with ruby fire eclipsed all other thoughts. She climbed in. The door shut with a heavy, final thud, the sound muffled by the armor plating. It felt like a vault ceiling locking her inside with the predator. The SUV pulled away from the curb with an impossibly silent smoothness, melting into the stream of city traffic. Inside, the silence was thick, deafening. The car smelled of rich, dark leather, expensive cologne, and something else, an underlying metallic tang, like old blood or gun oil. Emery stared rigidly out the window, watching the familiar streets blur into watery streaks of light, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Where are you taking me?" she finally forced out, her voice barely a whisper above the engine's low thrum. "Somewhere safe," he replied, his voice calm, measured, still looking forward. "Somewhere you can't be heard." Emery's blood ran cold. That did not sound safe. That sounded like the prelude to disappearance. "But I want to go home." "You don't have a home anymore," he said, the statement flat, objective, brutal. "Not one that's safe, anyway. The men who killed your father. They didn't get what they were looking for." Emery turned sharply, startled. "What are you talking about? They got the ring. I told you." "No," Morello said, finally turning his head to look at her fully. His dark eyes, in the close confines of the car, seemed to pull her in bottomless pools of shadow. They got a ring. A very convincing copy. Not the ring. Emery's breath caught. The world seemed to tilt. How could you possibly know that? Because, he said, holding up his right hand again, the ruby eyes of his own phoenix seeming to wink, to mock her in the dim light. My father, Enzo Vassallo the Dawn, had 2 identical rings commissioned decades ago, forged from the same gold, symbols of an unbreakable bond. He paused, letting the weight of his next words land like hammer blows. One for him and one for his consigliere. He held her gaze unwavering. Your father wasn't an accountant, Emery. He was Liam Walsh, my father's most trusted advisor, his right hand, his sworn brother. And I believe the same man who orchestrated my father's poisoning is the man who murdered yours. The SUV swept silently down a private ramp beneath a towering glass skyscraper, plunging them into brightly lit subterranean shadows. The world dissolved into a dizzying vortex. Consigliere poisoned her father, her gentle, book-loving father, part of this violent, hidden world. Her memories felt like lies, fragile illusions shattered by the brutal truth. The elevator ascended in complete silence, opening directly into a penthouse apartment that defied belief. It was vast, minimalist, almost painfully sterile. Gleaming marble floors, stark white walls adorned with imposing modern art, and floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a breathtaking, rain-lashed panorama of Central Park. It was less a home, more a statement of untouchable power, a beautiful empty cage. Stay here, Morello commanded, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. My men are outside the door. No one gets in, no one gets out. He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. We have things to discuss about your father, about mine, about who wanted them both dead. He turned and left her standing alone in the center of the enormous room, the silence stretching as the elevator doors whispered shut, leaving her trapped with 1,000 fractured questions and the terrifying, paralyzing weight of a truth she couldn't comprehend. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and echoing shadows. Emery stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, the rhythmic pattering of the rain against the vast windows the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Below, the lights of Manhattan glittered, a million indifferent stars in a concrete galaxy. She felt utterly disconnected from that world, adrift in a terrifying new reality. Her mind was a chaotic labyrinth, echoing with Morello Vassallo's words. Consigliere, poisoned, murdered. It was a lie. It had to be. Her father was Liam Walsh. He wore slightly too large cardigans that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. He struggled with the Sunday crossword puzzle, often asking her for help with the clues. He made terrible puns that made her groan but secretly cherish. He read her myths before bed, his voice gentle and calm. He could not have been a gangster, a consigliere, part of this. The image she held of him, the cornerstone of her entire existence, crumbled, turning to ash. And yet, the ring, the identical phoenix ring Morello wore, her father's missing ring, stolen the night he died. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The mystery surrounding his death, the hushed tones of the police, the speed with which the robbery case had been closed. It all made a terrible kind of sense now. Anger surged, hot and fierce, momentarily eclipsing the gnawing fear, anger at her father. How could he live a double life, exposing her, however unintentionally, to this dangerous, violent world? How could he leave her drowning in debt while sitting on secrets that involved this? But beneath the anger, a deeper, colder understanding began to dawn. He hadn't exposed her. He had shielded her. The simple apartment, the quiet life, the carefully constructed facade of mundane accountancy. It was all a wall built to protect her, a wall that had cost him his life. He hadn't betrayed her. He had betrayed them, the Vassallos, perhaps by trying to keep her safe, separate, and they had killed him for it. The fear she felt began to morph, crystallizing into something hard and sharp. Resolve. She wouldn't let his death be meaningless. She wouldn't let the lies win. She wouldn't let whoever murdered him get away with it. Even if it meant stepping into the shadows her father had tried so desperately to keep her from. Morello returned hours later as the rain finally subsided and the first hints of a bruised dawn stained the eastern sky. He moved silently, having shed his suit jacket and tie. He was in a crisp white shirt, the top buttons undone, the sleeves rolled up to reveal darkly tanned forearms dusted with fine black hair. He looked less like a Don and more like a high-stakes CEO after an all-night negotiation. But the coiled tension, the latent danger, was still there, humming just beneath the surface like high-voltage wires. He found her standing exactly where he had left her, by the window, staring out at the awakening city. She hadn't slept. She hadn't moved. But something had changed in her posture. The trembling had stopped. The victim's slump was gone. She stood straight, her chin slightly lifted, facing the unknown future with a terrifying, newfound stillness. He stopped, observing her, his dark eyes narrowed slightly. The change was palpable. She wasn't broken. She was sharpening. "You look," he began, then stopped, searching for the right word. "Awake," Emery finished for him, her voice low but steady. She turned from the window to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed from unshed tears, but they held his gaze directly. No more averted glances, no more flinching. He nodded slowly. He poured 2 glasses of amber whiskey again from a crystal decanter on a nearby bar cart. This time, when he held one out to her, she took it. Her hand was perfectly steady. "Drink," he said, his voice softer than before, lacking the sharp edge of command. "You'll need it." She took a sip. The liquid burned, a familiar fire, but this time it didn't jolt her. It anchored her. "You lied to me," she stated. "Not an accusation, just a fact. In the restaurant, you knew who my father was as soon as I said his name." Morello didn't deny it. He took a slow swallow of his own drink. "I suspected Liam Walsh was not a common name in my father's circle. And the ring, it confirmed it, but I needed to be sure. I needed to see your reaction to gauge if you were part of—" He hesitated. "Whatever game is being played." "There is no game," Emery said, the cold anger returning. "My father is dead. Your father is dead. This isn't a game." "No," he agreed, his voice somber. "It is not." He walked toward the window, swirling the liquid in his glass, staring down at the city lights as if searching for answers in their random patterns. 6 months ago, my father, Enzo Vassallo, died. The official cause released to the public and even to most of the family was a sudden, massive heart attack. He turned back to her, his face a mask of controlled grief and simmering rage. It was not. He was poisoned slowly, meticulously over weeks. A poison that mimics cardiac arrest. Untraceable unless you know exactly what to look for. Emery felt a wave of nausea. Poisoned. It was deliberate, calculated, evil. "Who?" she whispered. "That," Morello said, his voice dropping, becoming a dangerous murmur, "is the question that has kept me awake every night since. The only 2 people who had constant, unfiltered access to his food, his drink, his private study during those final weeks were me." He tapped his own chest. "And his consigliere, Liam Walsh." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emery felt the floor drop out from under her. No, he wouldn't. He loved your father. He served him faithfully for 20 years. He was also deeply in debt, according to records I found." Morello cut her off, his voice hardening again, the grieving sun replaced by the dawn. "Personal debts, significant ones. Things even my father didn't know about." Emery flinched, remembering the medical bills. Her father had hidden the extent of them, even from her. He had been desperate, but desperate enough to kill? No, never. "That doesn't make him a murderer," she cried, taking a step toward him. "He was trying to save his life. And days after my father was buried," Morello continued, relentless, ignoring her plea, "Liam Walsh was found dead, a convenient robbery. His ring, the twin to mine, the key was gone. He paused, letting the damning timeline sink in. My uncle Antonio Vassallo, my father's younger brother, now my advisor, believes the case is closed. He believes your father poisoned mine, perhaps working for a rival family, perhaps just for the money hidden in that Swiss vault. He thinks Liam was then silenced by his new partners after delivering the ring. My uncle, Morello continued, his voice laced with a fine thread of disdain that Emery hadn't noticed before, is traditional. He sees the world in black and white, loyalty and betrayal. He believes your father was a traitor, and therefore, his eyes met hers, cold and direct. As his daughter, you are either complicit, a beneficiary of his treason, or at the very least, a dangerous loose end. Someone who might know where Liam hid incriminating evidence before he died. He wants you found, Emery. He wants you silenced permanently. The threat was no longer implied. It was stark, brutal, and aimed directly at her. And you? Emery asked again, her voice shaking despite her resolve. What do you really believe, Morello? Her life hung on his answer. Morello held her gaze for a long moment, the silence stretching, filled only by the distant hum of the city. His own dark eyes were a battleground of conflicting emotions. Suspicion, grief, calculation, and something else, something she couldn't name. I believe, he said finally, his voice low, measured, that my Uncle Antonio is ambitious and perhaps impatient. He chose his words carefully. I believe he sees betrayal everywhere because it is the air he breathes. I knew your father, Emery. Not well, perhaps. I was young when he was most active, but I knew him. He was quiet. He was meticulous. He was the only man I ever saw challenge my father's reasoning. Not with force, but with logic. My father respected him immensely. He took a step closer. I do not want to believe he was a traitor. A tiny, fragile spark of hope reignited in Emery's chest, stronger this time. He didn't condemn her father. But Morello continued, his voice hardening again. I am the Don now. I cannot afford sentiment. I cannot afford blind trust. Your father was in debt. He did have access, and he is dead. I believe he knew who the real traitor was. I believe he was killed because he got too close to the truth. And I believe that ring, his ring, the one that was supposedly stolen, is the key to unlocking everything. Emery sank onto one of the ridiculously expensive, uncomfortable white sofas. Her entire life, her entire memory of her father, felt like a fragile piece of glass, cracked and ready to shatter. He wasn't just an accountant. He was a consigliere. He lived in a world of secrets and danger, and he had died in it, leaving her behind, alone. She was torn. A primal instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear, to find some anonymous corner of the world and forget the name Vassallo. Forget the Phoenix ring. Forget everything. She wanted to mourn her father, the simple man she thought she knew. But another part of her, a newly awakened core of cold, hard anger, refused to run. It demanded justice. It demanded truth. It demanded that the monster who ordered her father's death, whether it was Antonio or someone else entirely, pay the price. Why are you telling me all this? She asked, her voice low, raspy. Why keep me here? What do you want from me? Am I your prisoner? Your leverage against your uncle? You are my guest, he said again, the words still sounding alien on his tongue. Protected, for now. He paused, his gaze intense. And you are my only advantage. Antonio and his old guard, the men loyal to my father's more traditional methods, they are watching me. They resent my attempts to legitimize our operations. They think I'm too young, too soft. They are waiting for me to fail. They are also undoubtedly watching you. They believe, as I do, that your father left you something. A clue, a key, or the location of the ring itself. I told you, she insisted, frustration making her voice sharp. It was stolen, taken when he was killed. A copy was stolen, Morello corrected patiently, as if explaining to a child. A detail the killer focused on silencing Liam quickly likely wouldn't have noticed in the dark. Liam was far too careful, too meticulous to carry the real key with him unprotected. He must have known he was in danger in those final days. He must have anticipated this. He would have hidden the real one. He leaned in again, invading her space. His proximity both terrifying and strangely compelling. The air crackled between them. "You, Emery Walsh," he murmured, his voice a low, possessive thrum that sent an unwanted shiver down her spine, "are the only person alive who might possess the subconscious key to finding it. You are the only one who truly knew Liam, the man, not the consigliere. He left the answer with you, Emery, hidden in plain sight. I am certain of it. You just haven't realized it yet." Emery felt the trap closing. He was right. She was cornered, terrified of him, terrified of this violent, alien world. But he was also dangling the one thing she craved more than safety. Answers, the truth about her father's life and his death. Her father's daughter wasn't just brave. She was intelligent. She understood the game. Now, she was a piece on the board, whether she liked it or not. She could be a passive pawn waiting to be sacrificed, or she could become an active player. "What?" she asked, her voice stronger now, colder, mirroring his own control. "Do you want from me, Morello?" "I want you to live," he said, the simplicity of it startling her. "And I want you to think." "Think?" Emery echoed, the word a brittle scoff in the oppressive silence of the penthouse. Her mind was a high-pitched shriek of colliding emotions. Grief, fear, rage, confusion. "Think about what, Morello? My entire life, the bedrock of who I am, has been revealed as a meticulously crafted lie. My father wasn't just an accountant. He was consigliere to a crime boss. He was part of this." Her gesture encompassed the opulent room, the city glittering beyond, the shadows clinging to the corners. "He was," Morello affirmed, his voice unyielding, offering no false comfort. He would not dilute the brutal truth for her. "He was the shield in the mind of the Vassallo family for 20 years. My father," he paused, a flicker of something, respect, perhaps even affection, crossing his cold features, "was the sword." He walked not toward her but toward a large, ornately carved antique desk that dominated one wall. He produced a small, almost invisible key and unlocked a lower drawer. Emery watched, her nerves frayed, expecting him to pull out a file, a weapon, something tangible relating to the danger they were discussing. Instead, he returned carrying a small, beautifully crafted box made of dark, aged wood, rosewood, perhaps. It looked ancient, precious. He placed it gently on the low glass table between them, the click of wood on glass unnaturally loud. "My great-grandfather Alaric Vassallo, the man who forged this family from Sicilian shadows and American ambition, had these commissioned," Morello said, his voice taking on a slightly different cadence, quieter, almost reverent. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded sapphire blue velvet, were two deep, identical impressions. But only one held an object. It was the phoenix ring, his phoenix ring, gleaming white gold, ruby eyes burning like captured embers. The second impression beside it was empty. "There were two," Morello confirmed, echoing Emery's earlier shock. "He had them forged by a master jeweler in Naples from the same single block of white gold, which itself was said to have been melted down from the hilt of his own father's sword. A matching set, symbols of absolute unity. The phoenix." He held up his hand, displaying the ring he wore. "One for the Don, my father Enzo, and one." His gaze met Emery's, heavy with significance. "For his consigliere, yours." Emery felt a chill snake down her spine, colder than the rain-washed air outside. The room felt suddenly ancient, haunted by the weight of this violent past. "They weren't just rings, Emery," Morello continued, his voice dropping, pulling her into the secret. "They weren't just symbols of a vow. They were keys." He gestured subtly toward a massive abstract oil painting dominating the far wall, a chaotic swirl of blacks, grays, and violent slashes of crimson. He walked toward it, Emery following hesitantly. He touched a specific point in the lower corner of the heavy frame, a spot indistinguishable from the rest. There was a faint click, and a section of the wall beside the painting slid back with a silent hydraulic hiss, revealing a high-tech biometric safe embedded within the structure of the building itself. A vault, Morello stated, deep beneath the Alps in Zurich. It holds the true legacy of the Vassallo family. Not the laundered money and offshore accounts. Not the legitimate businesses we operate as fronts. Not the properties scattered across the globe. He turned to face her, his dark eyes burning with a cold fire. It holds the truth. Decades of it, recorded meticulously. He locked his gaze with hers, making sure she understood the gravity. Every deal struck in darkness, every politician bought, every judge compromised, every betrayal discovered, every enemy neutralized, a black ledger, Emery, compiled by my father and yours over 20 years, designed as the ultimate insurance policy, protection against internal treason and external threats. He paused, letting the implications sink in. It can only be accessed by two identical keys inserted and turned simultaneously. The Phoenix rings. Emery finally truly understood the terrifying stakes. And your Uncle Antonio, he wants it. He wants it destroyed. Morello corrected, his voice hardening, becoming sharp as shattered glass. My father Enzo saw the way the wind was blowing. The old ways, they were becoming untenable. Too much risk, too much blood, too much attention in the modern world. He was moving the family toward legitimacy. A slow, painstaking process. One Antonio fought tooth and nail at every council meeting. He paced back toward the center of the room, restless energy radiating from him like heat. Antonio and his old guard, the captains, the soldiers who built their fortunes on extortion, on violence, on the old codes, they thrive in the shadows. They are the rot in the family's foundation. My father's black ledger, it doesn't just list our external enemies, Emery. It lists us. It details every illicit transaction, every skimming operation, every unauthorized hit Antonio sanctioned behind my father's back. Proves his treason. The past was no longer a ghost. It was a living, breathing monster, and its name was Antonio Vassallo. So he poisoned your father? Emery whispered, the horrific pieces clicking into place with nauseating clarity. To stop the reforms, to seize control. But he couldn't get the ledger. He needed both rings. He only had your father's ring after he died. Or so he thought. Morello interjected, his voice grim. He didn't realize the rings were identical until after Enzo was dead. He likely went to Liam then, demanding the consigliera's key, believing it was different, perhaps superior. And Liam? Morello's jaw clenched, a muscle feathering along his cheek. My God, your father was brave. He must have denied him, refused. He must have known in that instant that he was a dead man. He looked at Emery, his expression a mixture of grudging admiration and deep sorrow. So Liam hid the real ring, and to throw Antonio completely off the scent, to buy himself time or perhaps to protect you. He arranged to be murdered in a staged robbery and made sure a convincing copy was stolen from his body. Emery felt faint. Her father had orchestrated his own murder scene. No, not orchestrated. Anticipated. Prepared. Antonio has been tearing the city apart for 6 months, searching for the real one. Morello continued, his voice a low growl. He's been watching me, suspecting I might know something, waiting for me to make a mistake, to lead him to it. And now, his gaze met hers again, heavy with warning. Now he has me, Emery finished, her blood running cold. He thinks I know where my father hid the real ring. He thinks your father, in his final, desperate days, left the ring itself, or at least a clue to its location, with the only person on earth he truly, unconditionally trusted, me. Emery breathed. The weight of that trust, that legacy, settled upon her shoulders, heavy as a shroud. Her father hadn't just left her with medical debt and a shattered past. He had left her with a secret that could ignite a war, a mystery woven into the fabric of her mundane life, a dangerous inheritance. He had trusted her to be smart enough, strong enough to survive this, to finish what he started. I don't know anything, she stammered, the old fear returning, making her tremble. He didn't give me anything unusual. No cryptic messages, just his personal effects, his books, his reading glasses, his old pipe. Nothing. I packed it all myself after the funeral. Think, Emery, Morello urged, his voice softer now, insistent, almost gentle. It was the tone one used to coax a frightened witness or perhaps a partner. He wouldn't have left you unprepared. He wouldn't have left it to chance. Knowing Liam's mind, his love for symbols, for layers of meaning, he would have hidden it in plain sight. Something deeply personal, something connected to his past or to you, something only you would understand or eventually decipher. A riddle, a favorite phrase, a meaningful object. Emery closed her eyes, forcing herself past the fresh wave of grief, past the paralyzing fear. She pushed away the image of Morello, the Don, and focused only on Liam Walsh, her father. She pictured him in those last few weeks. He was sicker. She knew that now, attributing it to stress over the hospital bills. He was worried, withdrawn. He spent hours upon hours in his small, cluttered study, surrounded by his beloved books, the scent of old paper and cold pipe smoke clinging to him. Books, myths, stories, the Phoenix, she whispered again, the word barely audible, her eyes flying open, locking with Morello's. He went completely still, recognizing the shift in her, the spark of dawning realization. What about the Phoenix? He wasn't just interested. He was obsessed with the myth. Rebirth from ashes, rising stronger from destruction. She was thinking aloud now, the pieces tumbling together. He had this one book, not just any book about myths, but a specific, rare edition. Heavy, leather-bound, gilt-edged, Ovid's Metamorphoses. It was his most prized possession. His father gave it to him. She could almost hear his voice, gentle and instructive. He told me once, years ago, when I asked why it was so special, he said, "Everything you need to know about life is in here, Emery. How to fall, how to burn, and how to rise again." A slow ghost of a smile touched Morello's lips. It wasn't amusement. It was understanding, recognition. "A man of symbols," he murmured. "Of legacy, of course. And this book? Where is it now?" It's in his apartment," Emery said, her heart starting to thrum with a mixture of hope and dread. "The apartment I couldn't afford to keep paying rent on is still there. I packed everything into boxes weeks ago, waiting for the strength to clear it all out." She pointed vaguely toward Queens. "Dad's books." "Then," Morello said, his power returning instantly, the strategist taking over, decisive and absolute. "That's where we go." He was already moving toward the door, reaching for his phone. "Antonio has undoubtedly had the apartment watched since Liam died, but he wouldn't have tossed it, not without knowing precisely what he was looking for. He's been waiting, Emery, waiting for you to go back, waiting for you to lead him to the prize. He'll be watching now," Emery whispered, the dread coiling tight and cold in her stomach. "He'll know we're going." "I know," Morello said, pausing at the door, turning back to look at her. His eyes were hard, resolute, but held a flicker of something else. A shared purpose, a dangerous alliance. His voice was a cold promise. "And this time, Antonio won't be the only one watching." The subsequent 24 hours unfolded in a state of surreal, suspended animation. Emery remained within the opulent confines of the penthouse, a gilded cage transformed into a strategic waiting room. Morello, a whirlwind of cold, focused energy, was gone for long stretches, making arrangements, as his impassive guards informed her. He moved through the city's shadows, weaving a web of surveillance and counter-surveillance, preparing the chessboard for the deadly game ahead. Left alone with her thoughts, the vast apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like an echo chamber for her colliding emotions. The silence was broken only by the distant wailing sirens of the city, a constant reminder of the violence simmering beneath the surface of everyday life, a violence her father had navigated in secret for 2 decades. She was the daughter of a consigliere. The title felt alien, impossible. She replayed memories, searching for clues she had missed. His late nights explained away his deadlines, his sudden, unexplained trips, his quiet, watchful nature that she had mistaken for introversion, the secrets he had carried heavy as stones. Her initial anger, that hot surge of betrayal, began to cool, replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. He hadn't lied to her, he had lied to protect her. He had constructed a life of deliberate, almost impoverished normalcy, the worn cardigans, the struggling firm, the quiet apartment in Queens, as a shield against the brutal reality of his true existence within the Vassalo Empire. He had chosen a life of lies so she could have a life of truth. And he had died maintaining that separation. The fear she felt, that primal instinct to flee, hadn't vanished. It had simply shifted. It was no longer the paralyzing terror of a cornered animal. It was morphing into something sharper, colder, edged with a steely resolve she didn't recognize in herself. It was the resolve of a daughter determined to honor her father's sacrifice. She would not let his death be a footnote in a Mafia feud. She would not let the truth die with him. She would not let the monster who ordered his murder, this ambitious, treacherous Uncle Antonio Vassalo, win. Morello returned as the bruised purple of dusk bled into the city skyline, painting the glass walls of the penthouse in shades of shadow and dying light. He found her not pacing, not weeping, but sitting calmly at the enormous rosewood desk, studying a detailed map of her father's neighborhood spread out before her. She had showered, changed into clean clothes borrowed from some anonymous, expensive closet, and pulled her hair back severely from her face. The trembling was gone. The victim's hollow-eyed shock had been replaced by a focused, almost unnerving intensity. He stopped in the doorway, observing her, a flicker of surprise and perhaps something akin to respect in his dark eyes. The change was more than palpable. It was transformative. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was planning. "You're ready," he stated, the words quiet, an affirmation rather than a question. "I am," she replied, without looking up from the map. "Where have you been?" "Ensuring the board is set to my advantage," he said cryptically. Walking further into the room, he shed his jacket, tossing it onto a chair. He loosened his tie. He moved with the contained energy of a predator preparing to strike. "My men are in place. Eyes on every approach to your father's building. Communications are secure. Antonio will walk into a carefully orchestrated reception." "You make it sound so simple," Emery said, finally looking up. Her eyes met his, clear and direct. "People could get hurt, Morello, killed." "People have been hurt," he countered, his voice hardening. "My father, yours. This is not a game, Emery. This is war. Antonio is a cancer within my family. He needs to be cut out before he kills again, before he comes for you." "And you're sure he will?" she asked, needing to hear it again, needing to anchor her resolve. "Absolutely," Morello affirmed, his certainty chilling. "He believes Liam hid the ring or the key to finding it. He believes you are that key. He cannot allow you to live knowing what you might uncover or what you might represent. A living link to the consigliera he betrayed. He needs that ring, Emery. It's not just about the ledger anymore. It's about legitimacy. With my father gone and me relatively new to the throne, possessing both rings would be a powerful symbol. It would imply he was the chosen successor, the one who held both the Don's and the consigliera's trust." He came to stand beside her at the desk, looking down at the map. His proximity was a tangible force, a mixture of danger and an unexpected, unsettling sense of protection. "He will make his move tonight when we go for the book. He has to. So, I'm the bait," Emery said, her voice low but steady. "You are the catalyst," Morello corrected, his gaze fixed on the map, tracing a potential route with his finger. "And you will be protected. I give you my word." "The word of a Vallo," she murmured, the irony not lost on her. He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. "The word of the only Vallo who has told you the truth," he said pointedly, "the only one actively trying to keep you alive instead of putting a bullet in your head." She couldn't argue with that. She owed him her life, at least for now. But this alliance, born of shared grief and mutual danger, felt fragile, volatile. She was trusting the devil she knew against the monster she didn't. "What exactly is the plan?" she asked, pushing aside her unease. "We walk in, find the book, and wait for him to attack," Morello confirmed. He tapped the map. "We will approach the apartment block from the south, appearing to be alone. My primary team, Luca and 3 others, will already be inside the building, 2 floors above, 2 floors below. Secondary teams will cover the street, the alley, the rooftops, overwatch with long-range capabilities." He spoke with the calm precision of a general outlining a battlefield strategy. "Antonio's men will likely make their move either on the stairs or as we enter the apartment itself. They'll try to isolate us, neutralize me quickly, and take you." Emery swallowed hard. "And they will fail," Morello stated with absolute confidence. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a tiny flesh-colored earpiece. "You will wear this. You will hear me and you will hear Luca. You will do exactly as I say when I say it. No hesitation, no questions. Your survival depends on it." He held it out to her. This was it, the moment of commitment, the point of no return. Taking that earpiece, agreeing to this plan meant stepping fully into her father's world. It meant embracing the danger, the violence, the unknown. It meant choosing to fight, not flee. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. She thought of her father dying alone in his car, murdered for his loyalty. She thought of the mountain of debt, the constant fear she had lived with. She thought of Morello, this complicated, dangerous man who, against all odds, seemed determined to protect her while simultaneously using her. She made her choice, not just for her father's memory, but for herself. She wouldn't be a victim anymore. She took the earpiece, her fingers brushing his. The brief contact sent a jolt, an unexpected spark of electricity through her. She ignored it, focusing on the small piece of technology in her palm. "Okay," she said, her voice clear, resolute. "Tell me what to do." A flicker of surprise, quickly masked, crossed Morello's face. He nodded, a sharp gesture of acknowledgement. He showed her how to insert the earpiece, his fingers brushing the shell of her ear. Another jolt that made her breath shallow. "Keep your phone on you, fully charged," he instructed. "We'll use a secondary encrypted channel if necessary. Stay calm. Follow my lead." "And Emery," he paused, his dark eyes locking with hers, holding an intensity that went beyond strategic planning. "If things go sideways, if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. You disappear. That is an order." She wanted to argue, to say she wouldn't leave him, but the absolute command in his voice, the underlying steel beneath the concern, stopped her. She simply nodded. "Good," he said. He stepped back, the brief moment of connection broken, the dawn returning. "Luca will drive us. We leave in 10 minutes. The ride back to Queens was a masterclass in controlled tension. They sat in the back of a different SUV this time, less ostentatious, but no less armored. Luca drove with silent, focused efficiency. Morello sat beside Emery, seemingly relaxed, but his eyes constantly scanned the streets, the mirrors, the shadows between buildings. He murmured occasional low commands in Italian into his phone. Emery focused on her breathing, trying to quell the frantic fluttering in her chest. She could hear faint coded chatter through the earpiece, Luca confirming positions, teams reporting clear sight lines. It was surreal, terrifying. She felt like a character in a spy thriller, except the bullets were real, the danger immediate, the stakes unbearably high. As they turned onto her father's street, Morello touched her arm lightly. "Showtime," he murmured. "Remember, stay close. Follow my lead." The SUV slowed, pulling up a few doors down from her building. Another identical SUV pulled up behind them, blocking the street. Men emerged silently from both vehicles, melting into the darkness of doorways and parked cars. "He's here," Morello said, his voice a low growl, his eyes fixed on a dark sedan parked across the street, its engine idling. 2 in the car, at least 2 more inside the lobby, just as we predicted. He opened his door. "Let's go retrieve your father's legacy." He stepped out onto the wet pavement, the dim glow of the streetlights casting long shadows. He waited for her, offering his hand. Emery took a deep breath. She looked at his outstretched hand, then into his dark eyes. She saw the strategist, the killer, the Don. But she also saw the man who had vowed to protect her, the man who sought justice for his own father. She saw her unlikely, dangerous ally. She put her hand in his grip was firm, surprisingly warm. Together, they walked towards the entrance of the apartment building, towards the waiting trap, towards the truth hidden within the pages of an ancient myth. The labyrinth awaited. The air inside the narrow apartment building hallway was thick with the smells of stale cooking oil, damp plaster, and something else, the metallic ozone scent of imminent violence. Emery's hand tightened instinctively in Morello's as they ascended the worn linoleum stairs. Each creak of the floorboards under their feet sounded unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. Through the tiny earpiece, she heard Luca's muffled voice, calm and professional. Target 1 and 2 inside lobby neutralized. Non-lethal. Target 3 and 4 are on the second floor landing. Holding position. Neutralized. The word sent a chill down her spine. This was real. Copy, Morello murmured, his voice barely audible, his eyes scanning the shadowed corners of the stairwell ahead. We proceed to floor 3. Maintain radio silence unless engaged. They reached the third floor landing. The door to her father's apartment, apartment 3B, was just ahead. Paint peeling around the edges, looking depressingly ordinary considering the secrets it held. The hallway was dimly lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube overhead, casting long, dancing shadows. He's inside, Morello breathed, stopping just short of the door. He tilted his head slightly, listening. Emery held her breath, straining to hear faint scuffling sounds, a muffled curse. Someone was already in the apartment, searching. Antonio hadn't waited. Morello met her eyes, his expression grim. He mouthed the words, "Stay behind me." He drew a sleek black semi-automatic pistol from the back of his waistband. The movement was fluid, economical, terrifyingly practiced. He held it low against his thigh. He reached for the doorknob with his free hand, turning it slowly. Unlocked, he pushed the door open a few inches, peering into the darkness within. Then, in one swift, explosive motion, he kicked the door fully open, slamming it against the inside wall and moved inside, weapon raised. "Vassilo." Clear, Luca's voice crackled in Emery's ear, followed instantly by the sound of heavy bodies hitting the floor inside the apartment, grunts of pain, and the sharp command, "Secure them." Emery rushed in after Morello, her heart racing so fast it felt like it might burst. The apartment was chaos. 2 men in dark clothing lay groaning on the floor, being zip-tied by Luca and another of Morello's soldiers, who seemed to materialize from the shadows. The place had been ransacked. Boxes were overturned, furniture slashed, drawers pulled out and dumped. Whoever Antonio had sent had been tearing the place apart in a desperate, frantic search. "Clear," Luca reported, holstering his weapon. He nodded towards the 2 subdued men. Antonio's advance team, amateurs. Morello ignored them, his eyes already scanning the room, assessing the damage, his focus absolute. "Where is it, Emery?" "The book." Emery navigated the debris, her eyes landing on the box labeled Dad's Books, miraculously still upright in the corner, though its lid was torn open, some books spilling onto the floor. "There." She pointed, her voice trembling despite herself. While Luca and his partner dragged the subdued men out into the hallway, Morello crossed to the box. He knelt carefully, lifting out the remaining volumes. Plato, Homer, Shakespeare. Emery held her breath. And then there it was, at the very bottom, its heavy leather cover surprisingly intact amidst the chaos, the gilt-edged Ovid's Metamorphoses. Morello lifted it out reverently, handling it as if it were a holy relic. He ran his hand along the spine, feeling for the seam Emery had described. "Here," he murmured, his thumb finding the almost invisible join. "Clever man, your father." He tried to pry it open, but the panel was stuck fast, sealed by time or perhaps a hidden latch. "Help me," he said, handing the book to Emery. Her hands shook as she took the heavy volume. This was it, the culmination of her father's desperate final act. She remembered how he used to trace the spine absent-mindedly while reading. She ran her own fingers along the ribbed leather, pressing gently, searching. Click. A tiny, almost inaudible sound. The hidden panel sprang open by a fraction of an inch. Emery's breath caught. Her fingers fumbled, prying the panel wider. Inside, nestled in a hollow meticulously carved from the ancient pages, lay the second phoenix ring. It gleamed dully in the dim light filtering through the grimy window. White gold, identical to Morello's, the two ruby eyes like drops of blood against the pale metal. It rested on a small folded piece of parchment. "We found it," Emery breathed, tears welling in her eyes. Relief and grief washed over her in a dizzying wave. Her father had left her a message. He had trusted her. Morello reached for it, his expression unreadable. "Not so fast, nephew." The voice, dripping with false bonhomie and lethal intent, came from the doorway. Emery and Morello froze. Antonio Vassallo stood there, flanked by two more soldiers, larger and colder-eyed than the first pair. He held a silver-plated pistol casually at his side. He was smiling, a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Such a touching reunion. Antonio sneered, stepping further into the room, his men fanning out behind him. The dutiful son, the loyal daughter, uncovering the secrets of their treacherous fathers. Morello slowly straightened, placing himself subtly in front of Emery, shielding her with his body. He still held his own weapon low and ready. "Antonio," his voice was pure ice. "Your men failed. Leave now. There might still be a place for you somewhere far from here." Antonio chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound that made Emery's skin crawl. "A place? My place is here, Morello, at the head of this family. A place your father was too weak to hold and you are too naive to deserve." His eyes flicked to the book, to the ring nestled within. Ah, there it is, the key to everything. Liam's final little betrayal. He was no traitor, Emery cried out, unable to stay silent. He was loyal. He tried to stop you. Antonio's smile widened, becoming wolfish. Loyal? He was loyal to a dying man. A weakling who wanted to dismantle everything our ancestors bled for. Enzo was talking about dissolving territories, selling off assets, going legitimate. He spat the word like poison. He and Liam were going to cut me out. Cut out the men who built this empire. I did what was necessary for the family. You murdered your own brother, Morello stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, a pronouncement of guilt. You murdered his most loyal friend, all for power, all for greed. Power is the family, Morello, Antonio roared, his composure finally cracking, revealing the seething resentment beneath. Something you clearly don't understand. He nodded sharply to his men. Get the ring. Get the book. Kill them both. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Again, the soldiers advanced. Morello moved first. He was a blur of contained, lethal force. He shoved Emery backward towards the relative cover of an overturned armchair. Even as he fired two precise shots, one soldier crumpled, the other returned fire, bullets ripping through the plaster walls. Gunfire cracked in the confined space, deafening, terrifying. Plaster dust filled the air, choking Emery. Emery, the ring, the note. Now, Morello shouted, ducking behind a heavy bookcase as bullets splintered the wood above his head. Her hands trembled violently, but adrenaline surged. She snatched the ring and the folded parchment from the book's hollow. She shoved the ring onto her thumb, too large but secure for now, and unfolded the parchment. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a map. It was a list of numbers and letters and alphanumeric code. And beneath it, in her father's familiar neat script, Zurich Credit Suisse account 4815. The Phoenix always remembers the bank account. The ledger wasn't a physical book. It was digital, hidden behind layers of Swiss secrecy, accessible only by this code and the rings. Looking for this? Antonio's voice was suddenly right beside her. He had circled around during the firefight. Before Emery could react, he grabbed her arm, wrenching her up from behind the chair. He pressed the cold muzzle of his pistol against her temple. Drop it, Morello. Antonio shouted, dragging Emery towards the center of the room, using her as a human shield. Drop the gun or the girl dies and the ring goes with her. Morello froze, half exposed behind the bookcase. His face was a mask of fury and helplessness. He looked from Antonio's gun to Emery's terrified eyes. Let her go, Antonio, Morello said. His voice dangerously low. This is between us. It always was, Antonio sneered. Now the gun, slowly. Morello hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered his weapon, placing it on the floor. Good boy, Antonio purred. He tightened his grip on Emery. His gun still pressed hard against her skin. Now the ring, her ring. Give it to me. No, Emery cried, struggling uselessly against his iron grip. Give it to him, Emery, Morello said, his voice tight. It's not worth your life. Trembling, Emery pulled the ring from her thumb. Antonio snatched it, his eyes gleaming with avarice and triumph. He now held both phoenix rings. He held the key. Perfect, Antonio breathed. He smiled cruelly at Morello. You see, nephew, sentiment, weakness, it always costs you. He shifted his aim slightly, the muzzle now pointing directly at Morello's chest. Goodbye, Morello. Tell Enzo I said hello. Time seemed to stop. Emery saw the cold certainty in Antonio's eyes. She saw the resignation, quickly masked by defiance, on Morello's face. She heard the click as Antonio pulled back the hammer. Then she acted, driven by pure instinct, by a surge of adrenaline fueled by love and rage. Emery stomped down hard on Antonio's instep with her heel and simultaneously threw her head back, smashing it into his nose. Antonio roared in pain and surprise, his grip loosening for a split second. It was all Morello needed. He launched himself forward, not for his gun, but for Emery. He tackled Antonio, slamming all three of them into the opposite wall in a tangle of limbs. The gun went off. The deafening roar echoed in the small room. Emery felt a searing, unimaginable pain explode in her shoulder. Then a heavy weight crashed on top of her, pinning her against the floor. Morello. He didn't move. Morello, she gasped, the pain momentarily forgotten, replaced by a new, more profound terror. Morello. The doorframe exploded inward again as Luca and the rest of Morello's team, alerted by the gunfire, finally breached the apartment, their weapons spitting fire, screaming commands. Vassilo down. Antonio, momentarily stunned, raised his hands as multiple laser sights painted his chest. The fight was over in seconds. He stood amidst the carnage, breathing heavily, defeated, but unrepentant. Emery didn't care. She was clawing at the suffocating weight pinning her down. Morello, please get up, please. He groaned, a low, guttural sound of agony. He shifted, trying to roll off her, clutching his chest. A dark, wet stain was blossoming rapidly across the front of his expensive shirt, far worse than the graze she now realized she had taken on her shoulder. You okay? He gasped, his face ashen, beaded with sweat, his dark eyes desperately searching hers. Me? Her voice broke. You're shot right in the chest. A faint ghost of a smile touched his lips, a grimace of pain. He missed the important parts. Morello breathed, his voice weak, strained. He looked past her towards Antonio, who was being roughly secured by Luca. Secure him, Morello commanded, each word an effort. The warehouse protocol Omega. No one touches him but me. He slumped back, his head hitting the dusty floorboards, his breathing becoming terrifyingly shallow. Morello, Emery whispered frantically, pressing her hands against the bleeding wound, the warmth sickeningly slick beneath her fingers. Emery, he whispered, his hand weakly reaching for her. She grabbed it, holding on tight, tears blurring her vision. I'm here. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. The rings, he panted, his eyes fluttering. The code, Zurich. Emery looked wildly around the room. Amidst the chaos, she saw the book, the parchment with the code, and lying near Antonio's discarded weapon. Both phoenix rings, glinting innocently under the harsh fluorescent light. She scrambled, ignoring the fire in her shoulder, gathering them all, her trembling fingers closing around the cold metal, the fragile paper, the legacy of 2 dead fathers, the key to an empire, the cause of so much blood. "We have them," she sobbed, returning to his side, clutching the objects to her chest. "We have them both, Morello. The rings, the code, we have it all." "Good," he breathed, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. His eyes closed. "That's good." He went limp, his hands slackening in hers as the approaching sirens grew louder, closer, their mournful wail filling the dark, violent night. The hospital waiting room was a sterile, fluorescent-lit purgatory, smelling faintly of antiseptic and despair. Emery sat rigidly on a hard plastic chair, the cold seeping into her bones. Her shoulder throbbed beneath a makeshift bandage, a dull counterpoint to the frantic, panicked thrum of her heart. In one hand, she clutched the folded parchment bearing her father's code. In the other, the 2 heavy phoenix rings, their white gold strangely warm against her skin, their ruby eyes glinting like malevolent secrets. Morello's blood had dried stiff and dark on her clothes. She felt numb, adrift in a sea of shock and fear. Luca, Morello's ever-present, stone-faced lieutenant, stood guard by the frosted glass doors leading to the surgical wing. His suit was immaculate, showing no sign of the earlier violence, but his eyes held a grim, watchful tension. Occasionally, his phone would vibrate, and he would murmur low, coded responses in Italian. The Vassallo Empire, even with its Don fighting for his life, continued to turn. "He is strong, Signorina Walsh," Luca said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, breaking the agonizing silence. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the doors. "The Don, he has survived worse." Emery doubted that. She had seen the wound, the sheer volume of blood. She had felt his life force ebbing away, heavy and warm over her frantic hands. The fear was a physical sickness, a nauseating knot coiling deep in her stomach. What if Antonio's bullet succeeded where his betrayal had initially failed? What if she was left alone again, haunted by the ghosts of 2 fathers and the man who had inexplicably become her anchor in this storm? Hours crawled by, each tick of the institutional clock echoing like a hammer blow against her frayed nerves. Doctors and nurses moved with brisk, hushed efficiency, their faces carefully neutral. Emery felt invisible, an insignificant piece of flotsam washed up on the shore of a major trauma. Finally, as the first gray, rain-washed light of dawn began to filter through the high windows, a surgeon emerged. He pulled off his surgical cap, revealing sweat-plastered hair. His green scrubs were dark with exhaustion and something else. Emery's heart raced, bracing for the worst. "Family of Mr. Vassallo?" the surgeon asked, his eyes scanning the empty waiting area before landing on Emery and Luca. Luca stepped forward. "I represent the family. How is he?" The surgeon sighed, rubbing his eyes. "He's remarkably fortunate. The bullet entered high, missed the heart and major arteries by millimeters. Collapsed a lung, broke 2 ribs, caused significant internal bleeding, but we controlled it. We repaired the damage." He looked directly at Emery, a flicker of professional curiosity in his tired eyes. "He lost a lot of blood, but his vitals are stabilizing. He's in recovery. He's asking for someone named Emery." Relief crashed over Emery with the force of a physical blow. Her legs gave out, buckling beneath her. Luca caught her arm instantly, his grip surprisingly steady, preventing her from collapsing onto the cold tile floor. "Thank you," she whispered, the words choked by tears she hadn't realized she was holding back. Hot, stinging tears of sheer, unadulterated relief. "Thank God. He's not out of the woods yet," the surgeon cautioned. "But he's fighting. You can see him for a few minutes. I'll see you." Room 3. She was led through a maze of sterile corridors, the rhythmic beeping of machines growing louder. Morello lay in the center of the room, stark white sheets contrasting sharply with his olive skin, now pale and bruised. He was intubated, hooked up to a daunting web of tubes, wires, and monitors, their screens displaying a frantic symphony of data. His body struggled, but his dark eyes were open, narrowed, fighting against the heavy sedation, and they found her instantly. A nurse gently removed the breathing tube as Emery approached. Morello coughed, a raw, painful sound that reverberated in the sterile air. "You're still here," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, thick with pain and the lingering effects of the medication. "I'm still here," Emery confirmed, sinking into the chair beside his bed, her presence a quiet reassurance. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against his, then taking his hand. It felt fragile, almost ethereal, laced with 4 lines, a roadmap of his recent trauma, but blessedly warm. Real. His fingers tightened weakly around hers, a silent acknowledgement of her presence, a fragile connection in the sterile landscape of the ICU. "Antonio," he breathed, his voice a mere exhalation of sound. "Luca has him," Emery reassured him softly, her voice a soothing balm against his pain. "He's waiting for you. He's safe." "Good." His gaze flickered down to her other hand, the one still protectively clutching the rings and the parchment, the weight of the past held within her grasp. "And them?" he questioned, his voice strained but insistent. "I have them," she confirmed, holding them up slightly, a silent promise kept. "Both rings, the code, everything." A faint, almost imperceptible ghost of a smile touched his lips despite the pain it clearly caused him. A flicker of something akin to peace amidst the storm raging within his body. "My father and yours," he murmured, the words carrying the weight of generations. "They chose well." His eyes fluttered closed for a moment, a brief respite from the pain and the exhaustion. "Proud of you, Emery. You finished it." "We finished it," she corrected gently, squeezing his hand, a shared victory hard won. "Now you just rest. Heal." She stayed by his side relentlessly in the days that followed, a constant presence in his recovery. First in the sterile confines of the ICU, under the constant watchful eyes of Luca and his rotating security detail, where every beep and whir of the machines was a stark reminder of his fragility. And then, as Morello rapidly regained strength, fueled by sheer willpower and an iron constitution that defied expectations, back in the silent, glass-walled penthouse, it no longer felt like a cage. Watched over by Morello's quiet, professional team, their silent vigilance a comforting presence rather than a suffocating surveillance. It felt strangely like the safest place on earth, a sanctuary carved out amidst the chaos and danger, a bubble of peace in a world of violence. In the quiet hours of his recovery, as the city hummed below them, a constant reminder of the life that went on outside their sanctuary, they talked, truly talked, sharing their burdens and their truths. Emery spoke of her father, Liam Walsh, the gentle accountant who loved bad jokes and the comforting normalcy of routine. The man whose quiet integrity she now understood was a form of profound bravery, a steadfast refusal to compromise his values in a world that often demanded it. Morello, in turn, spoke of his father, Enzo Vassallo, the formidable Don, who carried the weight of a violent empire on his shoulders, but who in private wrestled with the desire for legitimacy, a yearning for a different path. He placed his absolute trust in the quiet wisdom of his consigliera, a testament to the man's character and influence. They were 2 complex men, bound by a vow symbolized by fire-forged gold and ultimately murdered by the same insidious betrayal, victims of a legacy of violence and deceit. Understanding the fathers helped Emery understand the son, the conflicting legacy Morello carried, the darkness he fought against, the honor he desperately sought to reclaim, the burden of expectations he struggled to overcome. When Morello was deemed strong enough, though still heavily bandaged and moving with painful stiffness, a visible reminder of his near-fatal encounter, he dealt with his uncle. Emery didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Antonio Vassallo simply ceased to exist. His name was struck from family records, his assets absorbed, his network of corrupt old guard, systematically and ruthlessly dismantled. Morello worked with a cold, surgical precision, cutting the cancer out of the Vassallo family structure, cauterizing the wounds and ensuring its future health. There were whispers, shadowy rumors in the underworld, tales of swift justice and merciless retribution, but no proof, just silence. A chilling void where Antonio Vassallo once stood. 1 month after the shooting, on a cold, clear November night, the wind whipping off the Hudson River, carrying the scent of brine and the promise of winter, Morello took Emery's hand. He was dressed impeccably again, the ordeal leaving him leaner perhaps, but hardening the steel in his spine, forging him anew in the fires of adversity. The danger was still there, a constant undercurrent in their lives, but it felt different now, less predatory, more protective. "It's time," he said, his voice quiet but firm, a resolve etched into every syllable. He drove them himself this time, not in an armored SUV, a symbol of his past life, but in a low-slung, impossibly elegant dark Bentley that whispered through the city streets, a silent predator gliding through the urban jungle. He drove them not towards the glittering lights of Manhattan, the heart of power and ambition, but back towards the industrial heart of Brooklyn, towards the iconic span of the Brooklyn Bridge, a symbol of connection and resilience. They parked and walked out onto the pedestrian walkway, the wind fierce and biting, tugging at their coats, a reminder of the harsh realities of the world outside. Below them, the East River was a black swirling ribbon reflecting the fractured lights of the city, a mirror to the fragmented past they were about to confront. The noise of the traffic behind them faded, replaced by the vast open silence of the night sky and the river's ceaseless flow, a timeless soundtrack to their pivotal moment. Morello stood beside her at the railing, looking out towards the dark water, the Statue of Liberty, a distant tiny beacon in the harbor, a symbol of hope and freedom. He held one phoenix ring, his father's, in his gloved palm, the gold gleaming faintly in the dim light. He held the other, Liam's, out to her, a silent offering. "This," he said, his voice carrying over the wind, laden with the weight of history, "is their legacy, the keys to the kingdom, the ledger, the truth?" He turned to look at her, his dark eyes searching her face in the dim light, seeking her guidance, her truth. "I can use it, Emery. We can use it. Access that ledger in Zurich. We could burn every rival family, expose every corrupt official, consolidate power beyond anything my father ever dreamed of. We could become untouchable." The temptation was there, a seductive whisper in his voice, promising power and control beyond measure. Emery looked down at the ring in her own hand, Liam's ring. Its ruby eyes seemed to glow with a dark, knowing fire, a silent warning against the allure of power. This heavy piece of gold represented everything her father had fought against, everything he had died trying to contain, the corrupting influence of wealth and secrets. This was the past. This was the poison. "That's what Antonio wanted," she said quietly, her voice steady against the wind, a voice of reason cutting through the seductive whispers of power. Power built on secrets and fear, control through betrayal. That's the cycle your father and mine were trying to break. She turned to face him fully, meeting his intense gaze, unwavering in her conviction. "Your father wanted to go legitimate. My father died protecting that vision. That is their true legacy, Morello. Not a digital ledger filled with names and sins. Not revenge. It's the choice they made. The choice to build something better, even at the cost of their lives." She held his gaze, unwavering in her belief. "Let it go, Morello. Let them go. Their war is over. Let their vow be finished." Morello looked down at the ring in his hand, then back at her face, illuminated by the distant city lights. He saw the strength that had faced down his uncle, the courage that had walked willingly into danger, the fierce loyalty that mirrored her father's. He saw the woman who had brought truth into his world of lies, the woman who had shown him a different path. He saw his future. He nodded slowly, a profound weight lifting from his shoulders, the burden of the past finally beginning to dissipate. "Together," he said, his voice thick with emotion, a shared commitment to a new beginning. He took her hand, the one holding Liam's ring, their fingers interlacing, a symbol of their intertwined destinies. Standing side by side, facing the dark river, the embodiment of the unknown future. On the count of 3, they threw the rings. The two phoenixes, symbols of a broken vow and a bloody past, arced through the cold night air, twin emblems of destruction and rebirth. They caught the light for one fleeting, brilliant second, twin sparks of fire and gold, before vanishing without a splash into the churning black water below, swallowed by the darkness. Gone. The vow was broken. The past was relinquished. The legacy redefined. A profound sense of peace, clean and absolute, settled over Emery, a sense of closure she had long sought. It was truly over. Her father was avenged not by more blood, but by the honoring of his final choice, a testament to his unwavering integrity. The Vassallo family our fathers knew is dead, Morello said, turning to her, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. The wind whipped strands of dark hair across his face, making him look wilder, younger, freer than she had ever seen him, unburdened by the weight of his family's history. "And what's left?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper against the wind, a question hanging in the air. "Us," he replied simply, his eyes filled with a love that transcended the darkness. He reached into his coat pocket, but this time he didn't pull out a relic burdened with secrets and death. He pulled out a small dark velvet box, its darkness contrasting sharply with the promise it held. Emery's breath caught in her throat. Her heart began a slow, heavy drum against her ribs, a rhythm of anticipation and hope. He didn't kneel. Not here. Not like this, amidst the echoes of the past. Instead, he opened the box, revealing a ring that shone even in the dim light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. It was breathtakingly simple, impossibly elegant, a testament to the beauty of a clean slate. A single flawless emerald-cut diamond flanked by two smaller baguettes on a clean platinum band, a symbol of purity and enduring strength. No symbols, no rubies, no past. "That," he said, nodding towards the river where the phoenix rings had disappeared, "was their vow. It was forged in shadows, bound by blood, and ultimately destroyed by betrayal." He looked back at her, his dark eyes holding an emotion so raw, so open it stole her breath, a vulnerability she had never witnessed before. "I want to make a new one, ours." He took her left hand, his fingers surprisingly gentle despite the cold, his touch sending a shiver of anticipation down her spine. "This ring holds no legacy, but the one we choose to build," he said, his voice thick, intense, a promise whispered on the wind. "It holds no secrets but the ones we share. It is not a key to a vault of sins. It is a promise." "Emery Walsh," he said, his voice dropping, becoming rough with emotion she had never thought him capable of, a vulnerability that touched her soul. "You are without question the bravest, most infuriatingly stubborn, and most profoundly honorable person I have ever had the privilege to know. You walked into my dark, broken world, and you didn't just bring the truth. You became the truth. You are my consigliere." He smiled faintly, a genuine expression of affection that warmed her from the inside out. "My partner, my conscience, my heart." He held her gaze, his eyes pleading, hopeful, and filled with a love that knew no bounds. "Let's build that new legacy together, Emery. Not on the ashes of the past, but on the foundation of our future. Let's build our life. Marry me." Tears streamed down Emery's face, blurring the glittering city lights, transforming them into a shimmering kaleidoscope of color. But for the first time in 6 long, agonizing months, they were not tears of grief or fear, not tears of sorrow or despair. They were tears of overwhelming, unexpected, impossible hope, a release of the pain and trauma she had endured. "Yes," she whispered, the wind seeming to carry the word across the water, sealing the promise, echoing her joy throughout the vast expanse of the night. "Yes, Morello, 1,000 times. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a symbol of their perfect union. He didn't let go of her hand. Instead, he drew her closer, wrapping his arms around her, pulling her tight against the warmth of his body, a haven from the cold. He buried his face in her hair, holding her as if she were the anchor in his storm-tossed world, his lifeline in the turbulent sea of his past. "No more shadows, Emery," he murmured against her skin, his voice filled with a heartfelt conviction. Only light, I promise you. She lifted her face to his, and his kiss under the vast, cold expanse of the night sky was not dangerous, not commanding, not possessive. It was a promise, a vow, a testament to their love and commitment. It was the first day of their empire, built not on blood, but on love.